Echoes of Valor centers on Marcus Thompson, a wealthy and powerful black CEO known for his humility and community dedication. When Jamal Henderson is wrongfully accused of robbery, Marcus steps in to prove his innocence, uncovering systemic racism and corruption within the Cedar Ridge Police Department. Faced with both subtle microaggressions and overt acts of discrimination from biased officers like the antagonistic Officer Daniels, Marcus endures intimidation and threats. The story exposes deep-seated prejudices and escalating tensions as Marcus battles a prejudiced system determined to silence him and uphold their unjust power. Marcus Thompson adjusted his tie as he stepped out of his sleek black Lexus and into the warm embrace of the morning sun. The downtown district of Cedar Ridge buzzed with its usual blend of small-town charm and urban hustle, a stark contrast to the high-stakes boardrooms he frequented daily as the CEO of Thompson Enterprises. Marcus was accustomed to commanding attention and respect. Yet today, he sought something entirely different. A quiet breakfast at Betty's Diner, a local establishment he frequented to unwind and reconnect with his community. Betty's Diner was a nostalgic nod to the 1950s, with its chrome accents, red vinyl booths, and jukebox in the corner playing classic hits. It was a place where everyone knew your name and your usual order, a stark contrast to the anonymity of his corporate life. Despite his wealth and influence, Marcus chose to dine here, valuing the simplicity and authenticity it offered. As he pushed open the door, the familiar chime announced his arrival. The din of casual conversations, clinking cutlery, and the sizzle from the kitchen greeted him. He scanned the room, spotting his favorite booth by the window. The waitress, Jenny, a young woman with a bright smile and a welcoming demeanor, waved him over. "Good morning, Marcus." "The usual?" she asked, already reaching for a notepad. "Morning, Jenny." "Yes, please." "And maybe something different today," Marcus replied, offering a warm smile. His genuine humility was part of what made him beloved in Cedar Ridge, despite his towering presence in the business world. Jenny nodded, scribbling down his order. "You got it. Anything specific in mind?" Marcus pondered for a moment. "How about the blueberry pancakes and a black coffee?" "Coming right up," she confirmed, before heading to the kitchen. He settled into the booth, the vinyl seat creaking slightly under his weight. As he looked out the window, he observed the town waking up, children heading to school, shop owners setting up for the day, and neighbors exchanging friendly greetings. Cedar Ridge was his home, and he took pride in giving back, whether through philanthropy or simply being present in everyday moments like these. As he waited for his meal, Marcus pulled out his phone, checking emails and scanning headlines. The social climate had been tense lately, with discussions around racial justice and systemic inequalities dominating conversations. Nationwide, Cedar Ridge, though smaller and seemingly insulated, was not immune to these undercurrents. Marcus, as a successful black entrepreneur, often found himself at the intersection of privilege and prejudice, navigating spaces where his authority could be both recognized and overlooked. His phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder for the upcoming Cedar Ridge Community Forum. It was a monthly event where residents could voice their concerns and suggestions directly to local leaders, including Marcus. He appreciated these gatherings, seeing them as opportunities to bridge gaps and foster understanding within the community. Jenny returned with his order, placing a stack of golden pancakes and a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. "Here you go, Marcus, enjoy." "Thanks, Jenny. They look amazing as always," he replied, taking a bite of the fluffy pancakes. The sweet burst of blueberries complemented the rich coffee perfectly. As he savored his meal, a group of teenagers entered the diner, their laughter and boisterous energy filling the space. Marcus couldn't help but smile, remembering his own younger days. He noticed one of them, a tall boy with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, giving him a nod of acknowledgement. These small interactions meant a lot to him, reinforcing his connection to Cedar Ridge. Lost in thought, Marcus didn't notice the tension that began to simmer in the room until it was too late. A man in a well-tailored suit approached the counter, clearly in a hurry. He was a stark contrast to the regular patrons, his presence commanding yet unapproachable. As he ordered a coffee, his gaze inadvertently met Marcus's through the window, and a flicker of recognition passed between them. The man turned away, but not before a hint of disdain clouded his expression. Marcus felt a pang of unease, but brushed it aside, focusing back on his meal. The diner was usually a place of comfort, but today, something felt different. A few minutes later, Jenny returned to clear his plates, her friendly chatter a soothing backdrop to his contemplations. "So, any plans for the weekend, Marcus?" He shook his head, taking another sip of coffee. "Just the usual, catching up on some reading and maybe a walk in the park." Jenny nodded, leaning against the counter. "Sounds nice. We're having a fundraiser next month. It'd be great to see you there." "I'll definitely consider it. Thanks for letting me know." As she walked away, Marcus's mind drifted back to the man with the suit. Their brief encounter had stirred something within him, an unease he couldn't quite place. He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the immediate serenity of the diner. Suddenly, the door swung open and a gust of wind swept through the room. A young woman rushed in, breathless and frantic, her eyes wide with fear. She scanned the diner, landing on Marcus's booth. Without hesitation, she made her way over, pulling up a chair. "Mr. Thompson, I need your help," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It's about my brother." Marcus's calm demeanor remained intact as he gestured for her to sit. "Of course, please, tell me what's going on." The woman, introducing herself as Lisa, took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she clasped them on the table. "My brother, Jamal. He's been wrongfully accused of something he didn't do. They say he was involved in a robbery downtown last night, but he wasn't there. He's innocent, I swear." Marcus leaned forward, his expression attentive. "Tell me everything you know." Lisa began to recount the events, her voice shaky but determined. She explained how Jamal, a hard-working mechanic, had been at home tending to their mother when the robbery occurred. Security footage from the store, however, purportedly showed someone matching Jamal's description fleeing the scene. The police had been quick to arrest him, ignoring Lisa's assertions of his innocence. As she spoke, Marcus's mind raced. Cedar Ridge was small, and a wrongful accusation could devastate a person's life. He understood the weight of reputation and the ease with which it could be tarnished. Moreover, he was no stranger to navigating complex systems and advocating for those who were marginalized. "Have you filed a complaint or sought legal help?" Marcus asked, his voice steady. Lisa nodded. "I tried, but the legal fees are too high. We don't have the resources to fight this." Marcus reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I'll see what I can do. Let's get Jamal the support he needs." As they discussed the steps forward, Marcus felt the familiar drive to make things right. His role as a CEO often placed him in positions where he could affect change, but it was moments like these that truly tested his commitment to his community. Just then, the man in the suit returned, now with a group of stern-looking individuals. They approached the counter, and his eyes once again met Marcus's with a flicker of animosity. The tension in the diner was palpable, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Jenny, sensing the shift, moved to intervene. "Can I get you something else, sir?" The man sneered slightly. "No, thank you. Just trying to get my day started." He glanced around, his gaze lingering on Marcus for a moment longer, before turning away. Marcus watched him leave, the unease deepening. There was something more to that man's disdain, something that went beyond a mere fleeting interaction. It was a reminder that despite his wealth and status, prejudices still lingered, subtle but potent. As the day progressed, the diner remained a hive of activity. Lisa left, reassured by Marcus's promise to help, while the man in the suit and his entourage continued their business elsewhere. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the man's contempt was directed at him personally, an undercurrent of bias that was both frustrating and disheartening. Later that evening, Marcus returned to his penthouse apartment, a luxurious yet tastefully modest space that reflected his personality, elegant without being ostentatious. He sat down at his desk, the events of the day replaying in his mind, the wrongful accusation, the subtle racism he felt, and the persistent challenges of maintaining respect and authority in every facet of his life. He knew that his position afforded him certain privileges, but it also came with the responsibility to use his influence for good. Marcus had built his empire from the ground up, driven by a desire to uplift his community and create opportunities for those who were often overlooked. Yet, today's encounter was a stark reminder that systemic issues were deeply ingrained, requiring constant vigilance and proactive efforts to address. As he began to outline a plan to assist Lisa and Jamal, Marcus reflected on the duality of his existence, balancing the high-powered demands of his career with the grounded, empathetic connections he cherished in places like Betty's Diner. His wealth allowed him to make impactful changes, but it was his humility and genuine care that endeared him to those around him. Determined to make a difference, Marcus decided to leverage his resources and network to ensure Jamal received a fair trial. He contacted his legal team, arranged meetings with community leaders, and even reached out to media contacts to shed light on the case, hoping to prevent similar injustices in the future. In the midst of his preparations, Marcus's phone rang. It was his chief of staff, Elena. "Marcus, I wanted to remind you about the Cedar Ridge Community Forum tomorrow. It's a good opportunity to address some of the issues you're working on." He smiled, appreciating her reminder. "Thanks, Elena. I'll be there. Maybe we can use the platform to discuss some of the systemic challenges we're facing." Elena's voice was warm and supportive. "Absolutely. It's important that your voice is heard, not just in the boardroom, but in the community as well." As he hung up, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the day had reinforced his commitment to being a force for positive change, both within his company and in the broader social landscape. He understood that true leadership meant more than just financial success. It required empathy, resilience, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. That night, as he reviewed his notes and finalized his plans, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for the journey ahead. The brewing conflicts hinted at deeper societal issues, but he was ready to face them head-on, armed with his resources, influence, and unwavering dedication to justice and respect. The city lights of Cedar Ridge twinkled outside his window, a symbol of both the beauty and the complexities of the community he served. Marcus knew that the path to meaningful change was fraught with challenges, but he was determined to navigate it with the same tenacity and grace that had brought him this far. As sleep began to claim him, Marcus reflected on the delicate balance of his life, wealth and power tempered by humility and compassion. He drifted into rest with the understanding that his role was not just to lead a successful company, but to be a pillar of strength and support for those around him, ensuring that respect and dignity were upheld for everyone in Cedar Ridge and beyond. Marcus Thompson sat at his desk, the soft glow of his office lamp illuminating the array of documents spread before him. The Cedar Ridge Community Forum was only a day away, and he was determined to address the systemic issues that plagued his beloved town. But today, his focus shifted back to Lisa and her brother Jamal. He couldn't shake the feeling that Jamal's wrongful accusation was more than just an isolated incident. It was symptomatic of deeper prejudices within the system. The following morning, Marcus arrived early at the Cedar Ridge Police Department, his presence commanding, yet non-threatening. He was greeted by Officer Daniels, a tall man with a stern demeanor and a reputation for being unapproachable. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Officer Daniels acknowledged, his voice clipped. "What can I do for you today?" Marcus leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. "I need to discuss Jamal Henderson's case. Lisa called me last night, and I believe there's been a mistake." Daniels glanced at Marcus's impeccable suit and military-style posture, then at the files on his desk. "We've got everything under control. Jamal's fingerprints were found at the scene, and we have eyewitnesses placing him there." Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Fingerprint evidence isn't conclusive, especially if the chain of custody wasn't properly maintained. And as for eyewitnesses, we all know how unreliable human memory can be, especially under stress. Officer Daniels sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your concern, but this is a serious matter. We have protocols to follow." Marcus's patience was thinning, but he maintained his composure. "I understand protocols, but I also understand the importance of ensuring justice is served correctly. I want to help in any way I can to clear Jamal's name." Daniels's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle sign of discomfort. "We don't need help from external parties. Our investigations are thorough." Marcus sensed the underlying tension, the unspoken bias that perhaps Jamal was being singled out because of who he was. "I'm not here to interfere, officer. I just want to ensure that Jamal gets a fair evaluation. Can we review the evidence together?" Daniels hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Fine, let's take a look at the files. As they sifted through the paperwork, Marcus noted the hastily scanned documents and the absence of a detailed analysis. He found discrepancies that suggested procedural errors, evidence that could potentially exonerate Jamal. Here, Marcus pointed to a page. This timeline doesn't add up. The supposed time of Jamal's presence at the scene conflicts with his alibi provided by Lisa. Daniels glanced over, his expression unreadable. That's been addressed by the lead investigator. The alibi is weak. Marcus frowned, pressing further. Weak or fabricated, Jamal has no history of such behavior. It's possible he's being framed. Officer Daniels's jaw tightened, and he looked away briefly before meeting Marcus's gaze again. Framing is a serious accusation, Mr. Thompson. Are you sure you want to pursue this line of questioning? Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but kept his voice calm. I'm absolutely sure. If there's a possibility of wrongful conviction, it's our duty to explore it. As the meeting concluded, Marcus knew that he had only scratched the surface. The police department was resistant, and he could feel the bias in their reluctance to engage. Leaving the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that Jamal was being unfairly targeted, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with his legal team in his office. They gathered around the polished mahogany table, reviewing the case details. His lawyer, Simone Lee, a sharp and empathetic attorney, looked up as Marcus entered. "What's the latest?" Simone asked, her eyes scanning the documents. Marcus recounted his conversation with Officer Daniels, highlighting the procedural errors and potential biases. "I think Jamal's being framed, and we need to dig deeper. We should request a re-examination of the evidence and possibly bring in an independent investigator." Simone nodded thoughtfully. "It's a strong approach. However, you need to be prepared for pushback, not just from the police, but potentially from other officials who might not want this case to be reopened." Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I'm aware of that, but we can't let it go. Jamal deserves a fair chance." Just then, his phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder for the upcoming Cedar Ridge Community Forum. It was a monthly event where residents could voice their concerns and suggestions directly to local leaders, including Marcus. He appreciated these gatherings, seeing them as opportunities to bridge gaps and foster understanding within the community. The next day, Marcus decided to visit Jamal's mother, Mrs. Henderson, to offer support and discuss their strategy. The Henderson home was modest, a two-story house with a well-kept garden and an air of resilience. Mrs. Henderson welcomed him warmly, her eyes tired but filled with hope. "Thank you for coming, Marcus," she said, leading him to the living room. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson." "We're going to get Jamal out of this," Marcus assured her, his voice steady. As they sat down, Lisa entered, her face flushed with relief. "Thank you for helping us. I don't know what we'd do without you." Marcus reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together. Gregory and Simone are working on uncovering the truth." Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass interrupted their conversation. The front door flew open, and Officer Daniels stormed in, followed by two other uniformed officers. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk," Daniels announced, his voice harsh. Marcus stood, maintaining his composure despite the sudden intrusion. "What's the issue, officer?" Daniels held up a piece of paper, his expression unyielding. "We have evidence that you're interfering with police investigations. That's a violation of several protocols." Marcus felt a surge of anger, but he kept his voice calm. "I'm merely ensuring that Jamal receives a fair trial. If you have evidence to the contrary, I'd like to see it." One of the other officers, a younger man with a nervous demeanor, stepped forward. "We have reason to believe you're using your influence to manipulate the investigation. That's grounds for an official inquiry." Marcus raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying prejudice. "Influence? I'm simply advocating for justice, something we should all strive for." Daniels moved closer, his tone menacing. "This isn't a request, Mr. Thompson. You need to cease any involvement in this case immediately." Before Marcus could respond, the man in the suit appeared at the doorway, his presence commanding and authoritative. "Officer Daniels, I believe you're overstepping." Gregory Blackwell approached, his expression cool and controlled. "What's going on here?" Daniels bristled, but Gregory placed a hand on his shoulder, signaling him to calm down. Let's not escalate this unnecessarily. We're all on the same side here. Marcus seized the moment. If you're accusing me of obstruction, then perhaps you should focus on the real issues here. Jamal Henderson's wrongful accusation and the potential flaws in the investigation. Officer Daniels bristled, but the chief of police, a stout woman with graying hair and a stern expression, entered the room. What's going on here? Gregory stepped forward, explaining the situation in concise terms. We're discussing Mr. Thompson's involvement in ensuring justice for Jamal Henderson. I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding his intentions. The chief listened attentively, her gaze shifting between the officers and Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your concern for your community, but we need to follow our protocols. If you have evidence or concerns, you need to present them through the proper channels. Marcus nodded, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. I have presented my concerns, and I will continue to do so until Jamal receives a fair trial. The chief sighed, a sign of weariness evident in her demeanor. Very well. But please understand that any further interference could complicate matters for everyone involved. With that, the officers retreated, leaving Marcus and Gregory alone in the tense room. Gregory looked at Marcus, his expression unreadable. You're making waves, Thompson. This isn't just about Jamal anymore. There are forces at play that don't want the truth to come out. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. I don't know who else to trust. All I know is that Jamal is innocent, and I won't stop until the truth is revealed. Gregory placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're not alone in this. We need to be strategic and cautious. There are people in high places who will try to undermine your efforts. We have to anticipate their moves. Marcus nodded, appreciating Gregory's support despite their earlier tension. Thank you. I need all the help I can get. As they left the police department, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was just beginning. The subtle microaggressions, the overt acts of discrimination, and the systemic obstacles were all signs of a deeper issue that Cedar Ridge was grappling with. But Marcus was resolute. He had built his empire not just on wealth, but on integrity, and the desire to uplift his community. He wasn't about to let prejudice and bias stand in the way of justice. That evening, Marcus sat down with his legal team and Gregory to map out their next steps. Simone laid out the legal avenues they could pursue, while Gregory provided insights into the investigative tactics that could unearth the truth. They agreed to gather more evidence, interview witnesses, and challenge the procedural inconsistencies. As Marcus reviewed the plan, his phone buzzed again with another anonymous message. Stop this now, or there will be consequences. He stared at the screen, the words etched into his mind. This wasn't just about helping Jamal anymore. It was about confronting the prejudices and biases that allowed such injustices to occur. The stakes had never been higher, and Marcus knew that every move he made could either bring him closer to justice or draw him deeper into a web of systemic corruption. Determined, he looked around the room at his team. We need to stay focused and vigilant. This is bigger than Jamal. It's about holding the system accountable. Simone nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. We're with you every step of the way, Marcus. Gregory added. We need to expose the truth, but we have to do it smartly. There are people who don't want this to get out, and they'll try to sabotage our efforts. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Then let's make sure we're prepared for whatever comes our way. We can't let fear stop us from doing what's right. As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The initial conflict had only just begun to surface, revealing the pervasive prejudices and systemic barriers that Cedar Ridge was battling. But with his team by his side, he was ready to face the challenges head-on, knowing that the fight for justice was worth every ounce of effort. Later that night, Marcus walked through his apartment, the quiet streets of Cedar Ridge offering a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. He paused by the window, gazing out at the city lights that flickered like distant stars. The man in the suit watched him from across the street, his eyes still filled with contempt. Marcus knew that this was just the beginning, and that the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles and opposition. But he was ready for Jamal, for Lisa, and for the countless others who had been wronged by a system that too often failed to deliver true justice. Marcus Thompson was not just a wealthy and powerful CEO. He was a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience and strength of those who fought against prejudice and bias. As he turned away from the window, Marcus felt a surge of determination. The initial conflict had set the stage for a battle that would test his limits and his beliefs, but he was committed to seeing it through. The stakes were high, but the potential for change was greater. He knew that to truly make a difference, he had to confront the injustices head-on, using his influence and resources to challenge the status quo. It wasn't just about clearing Jamal's name. It was about creating a community where everyone, regardless of their background, could trust in the fairness and integrity of the system. With a final glance at the city skyline, Marcus made a silent vow. He would fight for justice, not just for one man, but for all those who had been marginalized and mistreated. And as he settled into his evening routine, he knew that the journey ahead would require every ounce of his strength, patience, and unwavering commitment to making Cedar Ridge a better, more equitable place for everyone. Marcus Thompson sat in his office, the city's skyline stretching out before him like a sea of possibilities. The weight of the day pressed down on him, each responsibility adding to the burden. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from his legal team and Gregory, his trusted ally. The wrongful accusation against Jamal Henderson was spiraling out of control, and the systemic biases within the Cedar Ridge Police Department were becoming painfully evident. Earlier that day, after his tense encounter at the police station, Marcus had returned to his penthouse with a renewed sense of urgency. The anonymous threat he received, "Stop this now, or there will be consequences," had left him unsettled. It was clear that powerful forces were at play, determined to suppress the truth and maintain their grip on authority. As he reviewed the latest evidence his team had uncovered, Marcus felt a surge of determination. Simone, his sharp and empathetic attorney, had managed to obtain copies of the security footage from the store where the robbery occurred. Upon closer inspection, it was evident that the footage had been tampered with. Frames were missing, and shadows suggested multiple angles were edited out to obscure Jamal's presence. "Look at this," Marcus pointed to the screen, highlighting the inconsistencies. "This isn't just a case of mistaken identity. Someone deliberately altered the footage to frame Jamal." Simone leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "This changes everything. If we can prove the footage was tampered with, we can expose the corruption within the department." Gregory, who had been quietly analyzing the documents, added, "We need to take this to the media. Public pressure might be the only way to force a thorough investigation." Marcus nodded, but his resolve was tempered by the looming threat. "We have to be careful. If they know we're onto them, they'll do everything in their power to stop us." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Officer Daniels stood in the doorway, flanked by two uniformed officers. His face was a mask of professionalism, but Marcus could sense the underlying hostility. "Mr. Thompson, we need to speak with you again," Daniels announced, his voice devoid of warmth. Marcus rose, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Of course, officer, please, come in." As Daniels and the officers entered, Marcus felt the room grow tense. He knew what was coming. "We've received reports that you're planning to leak the altered footage to the press," Daniels stated flatly. Marcus met his gaze evenly. "I'm planning to ensure that justice is served for Jamal. If the evidence is tampered with, then the integrity of the investigation is compromised." Daniels stepped forward, his expression unchanging. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Mr. Thompson. This department won't tolerate interference." Simone, who had been silently observing, interjected smoothly. "Officer Daniels, we're simply advocating for a fair and transparent process. If there are discrepancies in the evidence, it's our duty to address them." Daniels' eyes flickered with a hint of irritation. "There's nothing to address. Jamal's fingerprints are at the scene, and eyewitnesses have placed him there. These facts speak for themselves." Gregory, sensing the escalation, added cautiously, "Is there anything we can do to facilitate a more thorough review of the case?" Daniels shook his head. "No, Mr. Thompson. The investigation is complete. Jamal's guilt is established." Marcus felt a familiar mix of frustration and determination rise within him. If that's the case, then why does the footage show inconsistencies? Why are there missing frames? Daniel stiffened, clearly irritated by the probing. "We've already reviewed the footage thoroughly. Your insistence on reopening the case is causing unnecessary delays." Simone took a step closer, her voice firm. "This isn't about delays, It's about ensuring that every piece of evidence is accurate and untampered with. We have reason to believe that someone within the department is manipulating evidence to secure convictions." Daniel's facade cracked slightly, a brief flash of anger crossing his features. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thompson. Do you have proof of such misconduct?" Marcus met his gaze, his resolve unwavering. "We have evidence that suggests tampering. It's only fair that these claims are investigated properly." At that moment, the room seemed to close in around them. The officers flanking Daniels shifted uneasily, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Marcus knew he was walking a fine line. Challenging the police department directly was risky, but silence was no longer an option. Daniels took a deep breath, his posture rigid. "We have no choice but to request that you cease any further actions related to this case. Any continued interference will result in formal charges." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Formal charges for advocating for justice, that's a new low. Simone placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We're prepared to defend ourselves against any false accusations. Our only goal is to ensure that Jamal receives a fair trial." Daniels seemed to weigh his options, the room filled with an oppressive silence. Finally, he nodded curtly. "We'll consider your request, Mr. Thompson. But be warned, our patience is wearing thin." With that, the officers turned and left, the door closing with a heavy thud. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, the weight of the encounter settling over him. Simone and Gregory exchanged worried glances, but Marcus could see the determination in their eyes. "We need to move forward carefully," Simone said quietly. "If they're trying to intimidate us, we can't let them succeed." Gregory nodded in agreement. "I'll reach out to some of my contacts outside the department. We need allies who can help us expose this corruption." Marcus stood, the room feeling both smaller and larger than before. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. Jamal deserves better, and so does our community. We need to shine a light on this injustice, no matter the cost." As they strategized, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the systemic challenges they were up against. Cedar Ridge, despite its quaint exterior, was a microcosm of broader societal issues: prejudice, corruption, and the struggle for true equality. He had built his empire on principles of integrity and respect, but now those very values were being tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. Later that evening, Marcus attended a private meeting with the local media. He knew that controlling the narrative was crucial, and having a trusted journalist on their side could make a significant difference. Rebecca Hayes, a respected reporter with a reputation for uncovering the truth, had agreed to hear him out. In the dimly lit conference room of the Cedar Ridge Press, Marcus presented his findings and concerns to Rebecca. "The altered footage is a clear sign of misconduct. We have to investigate who is behind this tampering and hold them accountable." Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Do you have concrete evidence of the tampering, or is this based on suspicion?" Marcus pulled out a folder, handing it to her. "We have detailed discrepancies in the footage, missing frames, and witness testimonies that don't align with the official report. This isn't just an isolated incident. It points to a pattern of behavior within the department." Rebecca reviewed the documents, her expression thoughtful. "This is significant, Marcus. If what you're saying holds up, it could lead to major reforms, but you have to be prepared for pushback. The police department won't take this lightly." Marcus met her gaze, his resolve unshaken. "I'm aware of the risks, but doing nothing isn't an option. We have to stand up against this corruption." Rebecca nodded slowly, a spark of determination in her eyes. "I'll do what I can to help, but we need to ensure that our evidence is airtight. Any misstep, and this could backfire." As Marcus left the meeting, a sense of urgency propelled him forward. The path to justice was fraught with obstacles, but he couldn't turn back now. Jamal's fate, and the integrity of the Cedar Ridge Police Department, depended on their ability to expose the truth. The following day, Marcus organized a town hall meeting, inviting community members to voice their concerns and discuss the issues plaguing Cedar Ridge. The hall was packed, the air thick with anticipation and tension. People came from all walks of life, united by a shared desire for transparency and fairness. As Marcus took the stage, he could feel the eyes of the community on him, the weight of their expectations pressing down. He began by addressing the recent events surrounding Jamal Henderson. outlining the discrepancies in the evidence and the potential implications of the altered footage. "We are facing a serious issue of trust and integrity within our local law enforcement," Marcus stated firmly. "Jamal Henderson deserves a fair trial, and it is our responsibility to ensure that justice is served without prejudice or manipulation." A murmur ran through the crowd, a mix of agreement and anxiety. One woman in the front row, Mrs. Jenkins, raised her hand, her voice trembling. "How can we be sure that Jamal will receive a fair trial if the evidence against him is compromised?" Marcus nodded, acknowledging her concern. "That's why we're here, to demand transparency and accountability. We need to work together to uncover the truth and support those who are being wrongfully accused." As the discussion continued, it became clear that Cedar Ridge was at a crossroads. The community was divided, some loyal to the police department, others rallying behind Marcus and Jamal. The tension was palpable, the stakes incredibly high. In the midst of the town hall, Marcus received a message from Simone. "Marcus, you need to see this. It's urgent." He excused himself, stepping into a quiet corner of the hall to read the message. His heart raced as he read the content. A leaked internal memo from the police department indicating that the altered footage was part of a larger strategy to secure convictions more efficiently, regardless of the individual's actual involvement. "This is it," Simone's message read. "This confirms everything we suspected. We need to act now." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the breakthrough they needed, but it also meant that the opposition would escalate. He quickly gathered Simone and Gregory, sharing the leaked memo. "This changes everything," Simone said, her voice steady but urgent. "We have undeniable proof of systemic corruption. We need to take this public immediately." Gregory nodded, his eyes wide with concern. "But if we do, the department will retaliate. We need to ensure our safety, and the safety of anyone involved." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of the moment. "We have to do it. Jamal's life is at stake, and so is the integrity of our community. We can't let fear stop us from exposing the truth." As they finalized their plans to release the memo to the press, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of a major confrontation. The man in the suit, Gregory recalled, had been trying to intimidate him earlier. Now, with the evidence in hand, the path forward was clear but dangerous. That night, as Marcus reviewed the final draft of the press release, his phone buzzed with another message. "You've made the right choice, but now you'll face the consequences." He stared at the screen, the threat hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The stakes had never been higher, and Marcus knew that the coming days would test his resolve like never before. Determined, he sent the release to Rebecca Hayes, confident that the truth needed to be told, regardless of the cost. As the sun set over Cedar Ridge, Marcus felt the tension reach its peak. The battle for justice had intensified, and the final confrontation loomed on the horizon. As midnight approached, Marcus received a call from Gregory. "We need to meet. Now it's about Daniels." Heart pounding, Marcus hurried to their agreed location. A secluded cafe near the outskirts of town. Gregory was already there, his face etched with worry. "What happened?" Marcus demanded, sliding into the seat opposite him. Gregory glanced around nervously before speaking. "Daniels tried to intimidate me. He's escalating things. There are rumors of internal sabotage, attempts to discredit us. We need to secure our evidence and ensure our safety." Marcus felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "This is bigger than we thought. They're going to do everything they can to stop us." Gregory nodded. "Exactly. We need to anticipate their moves and stay one step ahead. The release is happening tonight, but we have to be ready for the fallout." As they strategized, the cafe's lights dimmed, signaling the late hour. Marcus knew that the next 24 hours would determine the outcome of their fight for justice. The tension was unbearable, the sense of impending conflict almost suffocating. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a group of uniformed officers entered, their leader bearing a striking resemblance to Officer Daniels. Marcus and Gregory exchanged a quick glance before Gregory stood, stepping forward with a calm yet defiant posture. "What can we do for you?" Gregory asked, his voice steady despite the palpable tension. The lead officer stepped up, his gaze hard and unyielding. "We need to speak with you both now." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "About what?" The officer's expression remained unreadable. "It's about the town hall meeting and the leaked memo. We have some questions." Marcus knew they were being cornered, the opposition closing in. But he also knew that backing down was not an option. "We're simply advocating for justice. If you have questions, we're willing to address them." The officer smirked slightly, a thin veneer of professionalism masking the underlying threat. "We believe a formal investigation is necessary. Please come with us." Gregory placed a hand on Marcus's arm, his eyes pleading for caution. "This is a misunderstanding. We've done nothing wrong." The officer shook his head. "We'll see about that." As the officers moved to escort them out, Marcus stood his ground, his internal strength unshaken, despite the escalating conflict. He glanced at Gregory, who squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. Together, they faced the opposition head-on, ready to defend their pursuit of justice. As they were led out of the cafe, Marcus couldn't help but feel the weight of the impending confrontation. The system they were up against was powerful and entrenched, but Marcus was resolute. He had come too far to turn back now. Walking through the quiet streets of Cedar Ridge, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation building. The climax of their battle was imminent, and the outcome would determine not just Jamal's fate, but the integrity of the entire community. He knew that the coming confrontation would test his limits, but he was prepared to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. The night air was cool and crisp, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the determination surge within him. The stage was set, and the final act was about to begin. The story of Marcus Thompson was reaching its most intense and critical point, a turning moment that would define his legacy and the future of Cedar Ridge. As they approached the police department, the tension was palpable. Marcus and Gregory stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fight for justice had reached its peak. The resolution was on the horizon, but the path was fraught with danger and uncertainty. With one last glance at Gregory, Marcus stepped forward, his resolve unshaken. The confrontation was about to unfold, and Marcus was prepared to confront the systemic corruption head-on, determined to ensure that justice prevailed for Jamal Henderson and for the community he so deeply cared about. Marcus Thompson stood shoulder to shoulder with Gregory as they entered the Cedar Ridge Police Department, the imposing facade of the building casting long shadows in the fading daylight. The tension between them was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the battle they were about to face. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with authority and skepticism, officers casting wary glances at Marcus's impeccably tailored suit and commanding presence. They were escorted to the interrogation room, a small sterile space with a single table and 2 chairs. Officer Daniels stood by the door, flanked by 2 uniformed officers who bore expressions of thinly veiled contempt. The chief of police, Officer Margaret Reynolds, entered the room, her stern demeanor immediately setting the tone. "Mr. Thompson, Mr. Gregory," she began, her voice devoid of warmth, "please, have a seat." Marcus and Gregory complied, settling into the chairs opposite Officer Reynolds. Simone Lee, Marcus's legal advisor, followed shortly, her presence a quiet support beside Marcus. "Let's get straight to the point," Reynolds stated, leaning forward. "We've received multiple complaints about your involvement in the Henderson case, allegations of tampering with evidence and attempting to influence the investigation are serious. How do you respond to these claims?" Marcus took a deep breath, maintaining his composure. "I'm here to ensure that justice is served. If there are procedural errors or evidence tampering, it needs to be addressed. My only intention is to clear Jamal Henderson's name and restore faith in our community's law enforcement." Reynolds's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your intentions are commendable, but the methods you're employing are crossing professional boundaries. You're using your influence and resources to interfere with a police investigation. That's not acceptable." Gregory interjected, his voice calm but firm. "We're not interfering. We're advocating for transparency and fairness. If there are discrepancies in the investigation, it's our duty to highlight them." Reynolds sighed, her expression unchanging. "There's a difference between advocacy and interference. Your actions have caused unnecessary delays and complications in a high-profile case. This cannot continue." Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but kept his voice steady. "This isn't about delays, it's about ensuring that the truth is uncovered. We have evidence of tampering, and we won't rest until it's exposed." Reynolds leaned back, her gaze shifting between Marcus and Gregory. "You need to cease your involvement immediately. Continuing down this path will leave us no choice but to take legal action against you for obstruction of justice." Before Marcus could respond, the door to the interrogation room swung open and Officer Daniels entered, followed by a group of uniformed officers. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with unspoken threats. "Chief, we've located additional evidence that implicates Mr. Thompson in influencing the Henderson case," Daniels announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "We have witness statements and surveillance footage that suggest collusion." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at Gregory and Simone, seeing their shared determination. "This is fabricated," he declared. "I have no connection to any wrongdoing. Jamal is innocent, and I will prove it." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, a hint of doubt flickering in her eyes. "Fabricated or strategically manipulated? We have records indicating that your company's private investigator was hired to look into the Henderson case. Can you explain that?" Marcus felt a surge of indignation. "My company has a legal team dedicated to community support. Hiring investigators to ensure justice is served is within our rights, especially when someone's reputation and freedom are at stake." Daniels stepped forward, holding up a file. "Mr. Thompson, we have here direct communication between your investigator and Officer Reynolds. It appears you were coordinating efforts to influence the investigation process." Marcus took the file, his hands steady despite the rising panic. He skimmed through the documents, finding evidence that indeed suggested inappropriate communication. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "My investigator was merely ensuring that all evidence was accurate and unaltered. There was no intent to influence the investigation improperly." Reynolds studied the documents, her expression conflicted. "Intent is difficult to prove. However, the appearance of impropriety is concerning. We need to look into this further." Gregory stepped closer, his presence a pillar of support. "Chief, this case has already been tainted by potential corruption. Pursuing charges against Marcus will only further erode public trust in the investigation. Let's focus on the real issue here: Jamal Henderson's innocence and the integrity of the evidence." Reynolds' jaw tightened, and for a moment, her resolve wavered. "This is a delicate situation, Mr. Gregory. Any misstep could lead to further complications." Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but knew they were treading on thin ice. "We're here to resolve these complications, not create new ones. If there's any evidence tampering, we need to address it now. Let's focus on finding the truth, rather than assigning blame prematurely." The room fell silent, the weight of Marcus's words hanging in the air. Reynolds looked between Marcus and Gregory, her stern facade showing signs of internal conflict. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. "Very well. We will initiate an independent review of the Henderson case and the alleged communications between your investigator and our department. Until then, we advise you to refrain from any further involvement in the case." As Reynolds and Daniels exited the room, Marcus felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had managed to buy some time, but the battle was far from over. Simone leaned in, her voice low and urgent. "We need to secure all our evidence and prepare for the independent review. This is just the beginning." Gregory added, "We should also reach out to Rebecca Hayes. If the media gets involved, it could help shed light on the corruption within the police department, but we have to be strategic about it." Marcus nodded, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. "Agreed. We need to ensure that our actions are beyond reproach and that the truth is presented clearly and effectively." That evening, Marcus met with Rebecca Hayes at a quiet restaurant, the ambient noise providing a semblance of normalcy. Amidst the chaos, he laid out the evidence they had uncovered, the inconsistencies in the investigation, and the communication between his investigator and the police department. Rebecca listened intently, her expression serious. "This is explosive, Marcus. If this is accurate, it could not only exonerate Jamal, but also expose deep-seated corruption within the Cedar Ridge Police Department. But we need to verify everything thoroughly before going public. One false step could undermine your credibility and jeopardize the entire case." Marcus understood the gravity of her words. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to ensure the truth comes out. Jamal deserves justice, and our community deserves integrity from those sworn to protect it." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. I'll coordinate with my team to verify the evidence and reach out to other sources who can corroborate these findings. If everything checks out, we can plan a strategic release to maximize impact and protect your interests." As they discussed their strategy, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were inching closer to exposing the truth, but the opposition was growing stronger. The man in the suit, whose contempt he had sensed earlier, was now an ominous presence lurking in the background, likely orchestrating efforts to derail their mission. The next morning, Marcus received an urgent call from Simone. "Marcus, you need to come to the office immediately. We've received a restraining order against you. They're claiming that you're a threat to the investigation and demanding you stay away from the Henderson case." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Who filed it?" "Officer Reynolds," Simone replied grimly. "She's taking this very seriously and pushing for legal action to silence you." Determined not to back down, Marcus replied, "I'll handle it. We can't let them intimidate us into silence." At the office, Marcus met with Simone and Gregory to discuss their next steps. The restraining order was a direct attempt to halt their efforts, to make it seem as though Marcus was overstepping his bounds and disrupting the police department's work. It was a clear sign that the opposition was escalating. Simone looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to fight this legally. We can appeal the restraining order and present evidence of the police department's misconduct. It's a risky move, but it might be the only way to keep pushing forward." Gregory added, "We should also consider increasing our media presence. The more public pressure we apply, the harder it will be for them to suppress the truth." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the situation, but resolute in his commitment. "Let's proceed with the appeal and coordinate with Rebecca to ensure that our media strategy is aligned. We need to show the community that we're fighting for justice, not just for Jamal, but for everyone who has been wronged by this system." As the day progressed, Marcus immersed himself in preparations, drafting legal responses, coordinating with his team, and ensuring that every piece of evidence was meticulously documented. The stakes were higher than ever, but his resolve only strengthened. Later that evening, as Marcus reviewed the final drafts of the legal documents, his phone buzzed with a new message. "You can't stop what's already in motion. Back off, or face the consequences." He stared at the screen, the threat fueling his determination rather than instilling fear. This was the point of no return, the moment where he had to fully commit to the fight against the systemic corruption that threatened to engulf his community. Determined, Marcus turned to his team. "We're moving forward with the appeal and the media campaign. We need to be ready for anything. This fight is far from over, and we need to stand united." As midnight approached, Marcus felt the culmination of their efforts bearing down on him. The tension was at its peak, the conflict intensifying with every passing moment. The community's eyes were now firmly on him, and the battle for justice was teetering on the edge of a decisive turning point. The following day, Rebecca reached out with a confirmation. "Marcus, the media verification is complete. We have concrete evidence of the tampering and the improper communications. We're ready to release the story as planned." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment they had been working towards, the chance to expose the truth and bring justice to Jamal Henderson. But he also knew that with the release came the full force of the opposition. As they prepared to launch the media campaign, Marcus received another anonymous call. The voice on the other end was cold and menacing. "You've pushed too far, Thompson. Stop now, or you'll regret it." Marcus felt a chill, but refused to be intimidated. "I'm fighting for what's right. There's nothing you can do to stop me." The call ended abruptly, leaving Marcus with a sense of foreboding. The stage was set, the tension was unbearable, and the stakes had never been higher. The community was watching, the media was ready, and Marcus was on the brink of a pivotal confrontation that would determine the future of Cedar Ridge. As he looked out over the city from his office window, Marcus felt a deep sense of purpose. The climax of their battle was imminent, and he was ready to take decisive action to ensure that justice prevailed. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but the fight for truth and integrity was reaching its most critical moment. With the media campaign about to launch and the legal battles intensifying, Marcus knew that the coming days would test his resolve and the strength of his alliances. The anticipation was thick, the outcome uncertain, but one thing was clear. Marcus Thompson was prepared to stand up against the systemic corruption, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cedar Ridge as Marcus Thompson prepared himself for the most pivotal moment of his fight for justice. The community was abuzz with the news of Jamal Henderson's potential exoneration, and tensions within the Cedar Ridge Police Department had reached a boiling point. The independent investigation had begun, but deep-rooted corruption threatened to undermine their efforts at every turn. Marcus arrived at the Cedar Ridge Police Department early, his presence a stark contrast to the usual rigidity of the institution. Dressed in a tailored suit that exuded both authority and approachability, he was a symbol of resilience and integrity. Accompanied by Simone Lee and Gregory Mitchell, he walked through the hallways with purpose, each step echoing the gravity of the confrontation that awaited them. They were led to the interrogation room once more, the sterile environment now familiar, yet fraught with renewed tension. Officer Daniels stood by the door, flanked by two uniformed officers whose expressions were tight with unease. Chief Margaret Reynolds entered last, her demeanor more contemplative than before, the leak of the internal memo clearly rattling her composure. "Mr. Thompson, Mr. Mitchell," Reynolds began, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of stress. "Thank you for coming. We need to address the escalating situation surrounding the Henderson case." Marcus met her gaze firmly. "We're here to ensure that justice is served. Jamal Henderson is innocent, and the evidence against him has been compromised. It's imperative that we uncover the truth behind the tampered footage and the internal communications that have come to light." Reynolds sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "We've conducted a preliminary review of the evidence you've provided. There are undeniable discrepancies, and it appears that some of our protocols were breached. However, we're still trying to identify who within the department is responsible for these actions." At that moment, Officer Daniels stepped forward, his face a mask of frustration and defensiveness. "Chief, we've traced some of the irregularities to higher-ups in the department. It's a tangled web, and bringing it all to light will destabilize our entire operation." Marcus felt a surge of indignation, but maintained his calm exterior. Stabilizing operations should never come at the expense of justice. If there are corrupt elements within the department, they need to be held accountable, regardless of their rank or position. Daniels's eyes narrowed, his voice lowering to a menacing tone. "You're overstepping, Thompson. This isn't just about one case, it's about the integrity of the entire police force. Exposing this could lead to chaos and undermine public trust." Simone interjected smoothly, her legal expertise shining through. "Officer Daniels, dismantling corrupt systems is essential for maintaining public trust. Transparency and accountability are the foundations of effective law enforcement. Without them, we risk losing the very community we're sworn to protect." Reynolds leaned forward, her expression conflicted. "We need to proceed with caution. Uncovering the full extent of the corruption will require time and resources, but we're committed to restoring integrity to the department." Just then, the door swung open abruptly, and a group of officers, led by Officer Daniels, stormed into the room. The air grew thick with tension as Daniels stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. "You think you can just walk in here and demand changes?" Daniels spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've caused nothing but problems. We have people watching you, Thompson. Don't think you're safe." Marcus remained seated, his posture relaxed, yet commanding. "I'm not looking for safety, I'm looking for justice. If there are people watching me, they should be ensuring that justice is served, not obstructing it." Daniels clenched his fists, taking a step closer. "You and your allies are jeopardizing this entire investigation. You need to back off before things get ugly." Gregory stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Officer Daniels, threatening Marcus Thompson doesn't solve anything. It only highlights the desperation and corruption within the department. We're here to work together to clean up this mess, not to create more." Reynolds raised her hand, signaling Daniels and his officers to hold back. "Enough. We're not here to intimidate. This department is under scrutiny, and we need to present a united front in addressing the corruption. Threatening our community leaders won't help our cause." Daniels sneered, but his demeanor softened slightly under Reynolds' authoritative presence. "Fine, but remember, Thompson, this isn't over. We're keeping an eye on you." As the officers retreated, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The immediate threat diffused, but the underlying tension remaining palpable. Marcus felt the weight of the confrontation settling over him, the stakes higher than ever. Simone leaned in, her voice low and urgent. "We need to expose the highest levels of corruption. It's clear that Daniels and possibly others are deeply entrenched in this web. We need concrete evidence that ties them directly to the tampering and cover-ups." Gregory nodded, his strategic mind already at work. "We should reach out to external investigators, and perhaps even federal authorities. Their involvement could provide the necessary leverage to dismantle the corrupt elements within the department." Marcus felt a surge of determination. "Agreed. We can't stop now. We've already made significant progress, but we need to push harder. The community is behind us, and the truth will prevail." As they strategized, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's threats were not mere bluster. The anonymous messages, the increased surveillance, and the persistent harassment were all signs that the opposition was escalating. The fight was no longer just about clearing Jamal's name. It was about dismantling a corrupt system that threatened the very fabric of Cedar Ridge. Later that evening, Marcus and his team convened at his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below as a backdrop to their plans. The stakes were life-changing, not just for Jamal, but for the integrity of the entire community. They had uncovered enough to expose the corruption, but the path forward was fraught with danger. Simone reviewed the latest legal documents, her eyes scanning the pages with meticulous precision. "We need to file a formal complaint against the corrupt officers and request federal oversight on the investigation. This will ensure that the department is held accountable and that our efforts aren't sabotaged from within." Gregory mapped out the logistics. "I've contacted a few trusted contacts in federal law enforcement. They're willing to assist us, but we need to present our evidence in a way that's indisputable. Any further tampering could jeopardize everything." Marcus nodded, his resolve unshaken. "We're on the right track, but we need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Daniels and his allies won't stop until they've silenced us." As they finalized their plans, Marcus felt a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a personal battle. It was a fight for the soul of Cedar Ridge. The revelations of corruption and prejudice within the police department were a call to action, a demand for systemic change that Marcus was determined to answer. The following day, as the town square buzzed with the energy of the ongoing protest, Marcus stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with unwavering conviction. "We're on the brink of something monumental. The truth is within our reach, and together, we can ensure that justice prevails, but we must remain vigilant and united in our pursuit of a fair and just community." As he spoke, the crowd's support surged, their chants and cheers reinforcing the collective will to fight against injustice. But amidst the hopeful atmosphere, Marcus knew that the real confrontation was still ahead. That evening, as Marcus and his team reviewed the final pieces of evidence, a loud crash echoed through the building. The lights flickered, and the power surged, causing the room to momentarily plunge into darkness. When the lights stabilized, they found the door to his penthouse shattered, glass strewn across the floor. Marcus sprang into action, his military training kicking in Simone, and Gregory followed, checking for any signs of forced entry. Their eyes met, the silent acknowledgement of an imminent threat passing between them. "Someone's trying to intimidate us," Gregory stated, his voice tense. "They're escalating the conflict." Marcus moved to secure the room, ensuring that no evidence was compromised. "We need to document this. It's another sign of the lengths they'll go to silence us." As he worked, his phone buzzed with another message. "You've awakened the beast. Prepare for the consequences." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but refused to show fear. "This only makes us stronger. We'll expose the truth, no matter what." Just then, the door burst open once more, and Officer Daniels stepped into the room, flanked by a team of uniformed officers. His expression was a mix of rage and desperation, the true extent of his corruption laid bare in his unwavering hostility. "You think you can destroy us with your lies and manipulation?" Daniels shouted, advancing toward Marcus. "We're done playing nice." Marcus stood his ground, his voice calm, but filled with authority. "This isn't about destruction, Daniels. It's about justice. You've betrayed your oath and the trust of this community. It ends now." Daniels lunged forward, but Marcus was ready. Drawing on his strategic thinking and resilience, he sidestepped the officer's charge, pushing Daniels back with a force born of frustration and determination. Simone and Gregory moved to support him, the room becoming a battleground of wills and ideologies. As the confrontation reached its peak, Reynolds entered the room once more, her expression a mixture of concern and authority. "Enough. This ends now." But the damage was done. Daniels, fueled by years of unchecked power and prejudice, was beyond reason. The room was filled with chaos as the officers and Marcus's team clashed, the fight for justice, now a physical struggle against systemic corruption. In the midst of the turmoil, a sudden revelation struck Marcus. He noticed a security camera in the corner of the room, its lens capturing every moment. Realizing the potential of this evidence, he signaled Simone and Gregory to focus their efforts on securing the footage. "Simone, make sure that camera is operational. We need this on record," Marcus commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Simone nodded, moving to access the camera's feed. As the footage played, it captured Daniel's true intentions, his aggressive tactics, the intimidation, and the blatant disregard for justice. The revelation was irrefutable, a final piece that would expose the depths of his corruption. Daniels, now aware that his actions were being documented, glared at Marcus with a mix of fear and rage. "You've ruined us," he spat, his voice breaking with emotion. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Marcus stood tall, his resolve unshaken. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and I'm here to bring you to justice." As the confrontation reached its climax, the door to the penthouse opened once more, this time revealing federal investigators and media personnel who had been tipped off about the escalating situation. The room fell silent as the authorities took control, the once formidable presence of the Cedar Ridge Police Department now exposed and vulnerable. Officer Daniels was taken into custody, his reign of corruption finally coming to an end. The community watched in stunned silence as the truth was laid bare, the face of injustice now publicly revealed. But as the dust settled and Marcus stood amidst the aftermath, a sense of uncertainty lingered. The battle had been won, but the war against systemic corruption and prejudice was far from over. The revelation of Daniel's true nature was a significant victory, but it was just the beginning of the journey toward restoring integrity and trust within Cedar Ridge. As Marcus looked out over the city from his penthouse window, he knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The confrontation had exposed the depths of corruption, but it had also ignited a spark of hope and determination within the community. The fight for justice had reached its most intense and critical moment, but the path forward was still filled with challenges and obstacles. With the revelation of Daniel's corruption and the support of his allies, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The climax of their struggle had been reached, but the resolution was yet to come. The community of Cedar Ridge was on the brink of transformation, and Marcus was prepared to lead the charge toward a more just and equitable future.